Welcome back to Random History, the podcast where we dig up the bizarre, the forgotten, and the downright weird stuff from the dusty archives of the past. I'm the navigator as we explore the little known events and people that make history such an amazing subject. These are not the topics you would have heard about in school. In fact, if you did hear about them, you're likely to think that they could not possibly be real. But they are. Today we have a kind of strange mix. For the main story, we're charting a course straight into one of the loudest, deadliest, and most colorful disasters in human history. The 1883 eruption of Krakatoa in the Sunda Strait of modern-day Indonesia. And for our True Heroes segment, we're going to examine one of the most amazing heroes of the European theater in World War II. Defying orders, he held a K bridge during the Battle of the Bulge. Had he failed, his entire division could have been wiped out. But before we look at that cold, blistery day in the Ardennes forest, we must first travel to the Dutch East Indies. So close your eyes and picture this. A sleepy, volcanic island sandwiched between the bustling islands of Java and Sumatra in what is today Indonesia, part of the Dutch East Indies back then. In the 1880s, the height of colonial empire building, steamships puffing across oceans, telegraphs buzzing with news from London to Batavia. That's the old name for Jakarta. But beneath the waves, Hell's Kitchen is heating up. This wasn't just a volcano blowing its top. It was a global gut punch that turned sunsets blood red, skies eerie green, and the world a little colder for years. Over 36,000 souls were lost, tsunamis as tall as cathedrals, and a boom that was heard over 3,000 miles away. Yeah, we're going there, so grab your hiking boots as we explore this island of volcanic fury. When I first heard of this event, I was teaching middle school science. When we were looking at the volcanoes and the Ring of Fire, I came across a documentary on Krakatoa and the tsunami it caused. This was shortly after the tsunami that hit Thailand in the early 2000s, and many of my students were refugees from Burma that had been living in camps in Thailand. All right, before we hit the fireworks, let's set the stage with a little backstory. Krakatoa, or Krakatau if you're feeling fancy, wasn't always a ticking time bomb. This pint-sized island was about 18 square miles of jungle and black sand, and it sat smack in the middle of the Sunda Strait, a vital shipping lane between Java and Sumatra. It formed eons ago from ancient lava flows. It had three main peaks by the 19th century. The feisty Perbotan in the north, the middling Danan in the middle, and the sturdy Rakata anchoring the south. The last big rumble for this island? 1680. When it belched some ash and it scared the locals. But by 1883, folks figured it was extinct. They were wrong. Dead wrong. The real drama kicked off in the spring of that year, thanks to the Earth's restless tectonic plates. See, Indonesia is a subduction zone hotspot. That means that the Indo-Australian plate is grinding and pushing under the Eurasian one. This cooks up magma like a pressure cooker on steroids. Simply put, magma rises, pressure builds, and boom, volcanoes. But Krakatoa had been quiet for 2 centuries. After the 1680 eruption, the magma cooled and it clogged the vents, and all the natural pressure release system was stuffed up. In May of 1883, fishermen off Java spotted white puffs coming from the island, like a giant smoking cigar. But by the 20th of May, explosions echoed across the strait, shaking windows in Angers and Merak. Ships began dodging the strait, reporting clouds of ash 6 miles high. That's higher than most airliners fly. The German warship Elizabeth sailed on May 28th, and logged a column of black clouds issuing from the highest point, with the sea littered with floating pumice. It's like nature's confetti. Activity fizzled by June, but don't be fooled. Underground, the magma's pooling and gases are compressing. It's the calm before the cataclysm. As Simon Winchester put it in his gripping account, this was the unchaining of the gates of hell, a perfect storm of geology and bad timing in an era when the world was more connected than ever, thanks to undersea cables and steam power. Colonial outpost buzzed with rumors. Is it the end of time? Pirates? Nah, it's just Mother Nature flexing. Little did they know the real show was warming up for August. Fast forward to mid-August. The Dutch East Indies Company, those spice trading overlords, are sweating bullets. Telegrams fly, Krakatoa active again, ash falling on plantations. On August 26th, around 1 p.m., Perboatan finally cracked. A colossal blast hurled gas, steam, and rocks 15 miles into the sky. It was visible from over 100 miles away. The air filled with a sulfuric stench, like rotten eggs meets brimstone. Over the next 21 hours, it's non-stop. Explosions every few minutes, louder than cannon fire. Ash raining down, turning day to dusk in nearby towns. Locals evacuated, but not fast enough. In Banten, on Java's coast, the ground quakes like an earthquake on caffeine. Sea levels yo-yoed, tides dropped 30 feet, stranding ships, then surge back with a vengeance. Observers on Sumatra scribble frantic notes. The mountain is splitting. One eyewitness, a Dutch official named Roger Verbeek, our unsung hero here, he was a geologist who later pieced together the puzzle and charted the escalating fury. By evening, the explosions synced up, like a demonic orchestra tuning up. Pressure's building to insane levels, the magma chamber's a balloon about to pop. And pop it does. To measure the violence of volcanic activity, they've created the Volcanic Explosivity Index, or the VEI. For Krakatoa, this was a 6 on the VEI scale. Think 200 megatons of TNT, or 13,000 times Hiroshima. But this was just getting started. In the Smithsonian's Volcanic Chronicle, the island's sides were fracturing, ready to collapse into the submarine caldera. Hang tight, though, because the main event is about to start. On 27 August 1883, around 5 a.m., the blasts hit fever pitch. Perboatan's crater is a geyser of fire, spewing pumice and scoria like shrapnel from hell. Then, at 10:02 a.m., the grand finale. A mega explosion ripped through the island, the fourth and loudest of the day. It catapulted 13 cubic miles of ejecta, that's rock, ash, and superheated gas, 50 miles up, punching through the stratosphere. The sound, that sound measured at about 310 decibels at its source. It's the loudest noise ever recorded. It was heard in Perth, Australia, 1,900 miles away. That's like a shotgun blast in New York, waking someone up in Los Angeles. The shockwave circled the globe 7 times, rattling barometers from Mauritius to Manhattan. In seconds, 2/3 of Krakatoa vanished. Perboatan and Danang, those peaks collapsed into the 5-mile-wide caldera, 1,000 feet deep, swallowing seawater in a hiss of steam. The island shrank from 18 square miles to a jagged stump. Pyroclastic flows, or rivers of 1,000 degrees Celsius gas and debris, raced down slope at 100 miles an hour, incinerating everything. But the real killer? The tsunamis. The collapse of the island displaced 4 cubic miles of ocean, birthing waves up to 120 feet high. They barrel across the strait at 60 miles an hour, smashing 165 villages on Java and Sumatra. Anjer obliterated, Bodies, boats, buildings hurled inland. The steamer Ludan rode a 100-foot-tall wave of water. The captain later reported the sea rose like a mountain. In Morocco, the waves stripped the town to its foundations, depositing the ship Barrow a mile inland. Its entire crew drowned. Over 36,000 dead, mostly from drowning. Tephra and blasts claim fewer, but the horror is unimaginable. Eyewitnesses describe skies black as night at noon, ash blanketing the sea in rafts miles wide. Verbeek's on-site survey posts paint a Pompeii-level wasteland. Coral reefs pulverized, forests flash-fried. As Tom Simkin and Richard Fisk recount in their exhaustive study, this wasn't just a local Armageddon, it was a planetary punctuation mark. In the hours after, the survivors stumble through knee-deep ash, gasping for air. The strait reeks of death. Fish boiled, corpses bobbing. Relief ships from Batavia arrive days later, finding coastal strips as if scraped by a giant eraser. Dutch authorities tally the toll. 20 villages on Java, 15 on Sumatra, gone. Corpses wash up in Zanzibar, 4,000 miles east, weeks later. The human cost? Mostly poor fishermen and farmers, caught in the empire's crosshairs. But Krakatoa didn't discriminate. European planners, Chinese merchants, all swept away. Economically, plantations were ruined, trade halted, the strait, that busy artery, clogged with pumicebergs, and the science rush began. Verbeek's 1884 report to the Dutch government compiled sketches, barograms, survival tales. Ground zero for volcanology. It sparked global curiosity, turning disaster into data. Agricultural records reveal cascading failures. Wheat fields in France dropped 15% in 1884, prompting emergency grain imports from Russia. Rice harvests in Java and Bali fell by 1/3, exacerbating colonial tax burdens, and maize shortages in the American Midwest contributed to the 1884 bread riots in Cincinnati. Marine fisheries off Peru collapsed as upwelling waters cooled, slashing anchovy catches by 80%, bankrupting guano exporters. These disruptions rippled through commodity markets, driving global wheat prices up 22% on the Chicago Board of Trade between September 1883 and March of 1884. The eruption's stratospheric injection of approximately 21 cubic kilometers of sulfur dioxide created a veil of sulfate aerosols that persisted for over 2 years, reducing incoming solar radiation by 5 to 10% at the mid-latitudes. This triggered the most pronounced short-term volcanic cooling event of the 19th century, with the northern hemisphere summer temperatures falling between 0.8 and 1.2 centimeters below the 1880 to 1882 baseline, and lingering anomalies through 1888. The cooling amplified existing La Niña conditions, displacing the intertropical convergence zone southward and producing anomalous drought in the Sahel, northern China, and the Indian subcontinent, while triggering excessive rainfall in southern Africa and western United States. Optically, the aerosol layer produced persistent dry fogs that scattered blue wavelengths, yielding lavender suns and crimson afterglows documented by artists from Edvard Munch in Norway to William Ashcroft in London. The Royal Society's 1888 Optical Subcommittee quantified the phenomenon. Moonlight dimmed by 25%, and the first appearance of a bishop's ring, a brownish halo around the sun, persisted until the mid-1886. These spectacles entered popular culture, inspiring verses in Tennyson's Locksley Hall 60 years after, and prompting P.T. Barnum to stage Krakatoa sunsets in his 1884 circus panorama. Seismically, the airwave's 7 global circuits registered on primitive barographs from Bogota to Tokyo, providing the first empirical data set for atmospheric wave propagation. This catalyzed the 1889 founding of the International Meteorological Organization Subcommittee on Atmospheric Electricity, whose standardized instruments later underpinned the 20th century's weather forecasting. Oceanographically, the 40-foot tsunami crossed the Indian Ocean in 12 hours, arriving at Aden with sufficient energy to snap mooring cables. Its pressure pulse was recorded on tide gauges in Le Havre and Honolulu. This began the systematic tsunami monitoring that we have today. Politically, the disaster exposed colonial vulnerabilities. Dutch indemnity claims totaled $139 million in today's dollars, straining the East Indies budget and fueling the 1885 parliamentary debates in The Hague over disaster insurance. In Britain, the Admiralty rerouted mail steamers via the Cape of Good Hope for 6 weeks, delaying Australian correspondence and prompting the 1884 Imperial Conference to prioritize redundant cable routes. Scientifically, the eruption birthed modern volcanology. The Royal Society's 500-page report synthesized 6,000 barograms, 1,200 tide records, and 400 pyroclastic samples, establishing protocols for interdisciplinary hazard assessment still used today by the Global Volcanism Program. Now, here's the kicker. Krakatoa is not done. That ash veil, 20 million tons lofted high, circled the Earth for 3 years. Skies turned apocalyptic, blood-red sunsets, green twilights, even blue moons from sulfur aerosols scattering the light. Poet Gerard Manley Hopkins wrote, "The world is changed with the grandeur of God," but privately noted the sunsets like inflamed flesh. Temperatures dropped 1.2 degrees Celsius globally. Harvests failed. Monsoons shifted. London fogs thickened. Los Angeles got 38 inches of rain in 1884, a record that still stands. And while the shock waves circled the Earth 7 times, the barometric pulse recorded 14 times around the world. Telegraphs lit up. Reuters wired Krakatoa catastrophe from Singapore to San Francisco, birthing the first true 24/7 global news cycle. As the Gale Archives noted, it's the dawn of media globalization. Headlines from Milwaukee to Manchester, fueling Victorian science fever. The Royal Society jumped in, commissioning a 500-page tome on waves, optics, even optical telegraph glitches. Krakatoa's legacy? Well, it proves that we're all connected. One island's rage, the whole world's stage. Phew. Anyway, from local terrors to global tremors, Krakatoa's 1883 roar reminds us that the past is never buried. It's just simmering. It killed indiscriminately, but it birthed insights that save lives today, from tsunami warnings to climate models. And hey, here's a fun fact. The child of Krakatoa, or Anak Krakatoa, popped up in 1927 and still continues to erupt today. Nature's kind of resilient like that. For today's hero, we have to leave the tropics of Indonesia and head back to the frozen hell of the Ardennes in Belgium during World War II. Specifically, the Battle of the Bulge, to shine light on a young soldier who became a legend in a single day. The Battle of the Bulge was brutal. Men suffered from frostbite, exhaustion, in addition to overwhelming enemy fire. Our hero overcame these obstacles, disobeyed orders to fall back, and still saved the day. His name? Francis S. Currey, but his friends called him Frank. At just 19 years old, he turned the tide against a German armored assault with nothing but grit, a bazooka, and whatever weapons he could scrounge. By the end of this episode, you'll see why he earned the Medal of Honor and inspired the original G.I. Joe action figure. Yeah, you heard that right. This guy's story is that epic. Once again, before we can get into the action, we've got to set the stage. The Battle of the Bulge was fought from 16 December 1944 to 25 January 1945, and it stands as one of the most grueling and pivotal engagements of World War II in the European theater. This last major German offensive on the Western Front aimed to split the Allied lines, capture the vital port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. Amid the dense Ardennes forest in Belgium, American forces faced brutal winter conditions, supply shortages, and a surprise attack by over 2,000 German troops supported by tanks and artillery. The battle resulted in over 75,000 American casualties, but it ultimately exhausted German resources and hastened the war's end. The Allies had pushed deep into Europe after D-Day, and victory seemed within reach. But Adolf Hitler had other plans, and he launched a massive surprise counteroffensive through the Ardennes forest in Belgium, aiming to split the Allied lines and capture Antwerp. This became known as the Battle of the Bulge, named for the massive salient or bulge it created on the map. Over 1 million men clash in brutal winter conditions, snow up to their knees, temperatures plummeting below zero, visibility reduced to nothing in blizzards. American troops, many of them green replacements, caught totally off guard. Adding to the terror was the Malmedy massacre, which happened on 17 December, just 4 days before the events of this podcast. News of the atrocity spread like wildfire among the troops, fueling a mix of fear and fury. Basically, no one wanted to surrender to these guys. Anyway, I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Let me introduce you to our hero, Francis Currey. Born on 29 June 1925 in Loch Sheldrake, New York, Frank had a tough start. Orphaned at 12, he was raised by foster parents on a farm in Hurleyville, New York. He graduated high school in 1942 at just 17 years old. He enlisted in the Army just a week later, eager to do his part fighting the war. He trained with the 75th Infantry Division, even completed officer candidate school at the age of 18, but his superiors thought he was too immature for a commission, so he shipped out as a private. Frank landed at Omaha Beach in July 1944, just a few weeks after D-Day, and he joined K Company, 3rd Battalion, 120th Infantry Regiment, 30th Infantry Division, or Old Hickory, as a replacement. It wasn't until November that he saw his first combat. That took place in Herzogenaurach, Germany, where he dealt with frostbite because, like many of the replacements, they lacked winter gear. But he proved himself quickly, rising to sergeant and then platoon leader in just 6 weeks. The Battle of the Bulge erupted on 16 December 1944, when German forces under Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt launched Operation Wacht am Rhein. This was Hitler's desperate gamble, and it involved elite panzer divisions, including the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, commanded by men like Joachim Peiper. The Ardennes region, lightly defended by American troops due to overextended lines and the thought that the Ardennes was too thick for tanks or anything like that to come through, it had become a killing ground. Snowdrifts reached several feet deep, temperatures plummeted below zero, and fog hampered air support of any kind. Malmedy, a quaint Belgian town, gained infamy on 17 December when Peiper's forces massacred 84 American prisoners at the Bugnes crossroads, an atrocity that fueled American resolve. By 20 December, Currey's unit had been rushed to Malmedy to reinforce defenses around a crucial bridge over the Varkt River. Currey's squad consisted of about 8 inexperienced teenagers, and it was positioned along the road leading to the bridge. They occupied foxholes between an abandoned paper mill and a former American command post, now serving as a makeshift strongpoint. Nearby, an anti-tank platoon with a 57mm gun and a half-track provided support. The men were exhausted, low on supplies, and faced an enemy that included Otto Skorzeny's commandos, special forces notorious for operations in American uniforms to sow confusion. Currey, the most trained in his squad despite his youth, carried the bar, the Browning automatic rifle, a weapon capable of delivering suppressive fire but ill-suited against tanks. As night fell on 20 December, the Americans braced for an assault, unaware that the Germans were probing their lines with reconnaissance units. On dawn of 21 December, the German attack commenced with ferocious intensity. Elements of the 1st SS Panzer Division, including Panther tanks and infantry, advanced across the 1,500-yard open valley toward the bridge. The fog lifted just enough to reveal the approaching armor, and Currey's position erupted into chaos. A lead Panther tank rumbled towards his foxhole, its commander exposed in the turret. Currey opened fire with his bar, forcing the officer to duck inside as the tank crossed the bridge and took up a position near a house sheltering wounded Americans. A second tank, ironically a captured American Sherman, repurposed by the Germans, followed suit, its turret traversing menacingly. The American anti-tank gun engaged, but the German tanks overran the tank destroyers and the anti-tank positions near the strong point. Intense artillery and small arms fire pinned down Currey's platoon, forcing a hasty withdrawal into a nearby paper mill. From the mill's windows, the squad fired sporadically, simulating a larger force to buy time. Inside, Currey discovered a discarded bazooka and a cache of rockets, critical weapons against armor. With a member of his squad, he braved the street under withering enemy fire from tanks and infantrymen who had seized the house just 50 yards away. In a display of audacious courage, Currey shouldered the bazooka and fired a rocket at the Sherman tank, hitting it in its turret ring. It's where the turret meets the chassis, and jammed it in place. The crew were forced to abandon the vehicle and scattered into the occupied house. Not content with this, Currey advanced alone toward the enemy-held building, his bar at the ready. He spotted 3 Germans in the doorway and unleashed a burst, killing or wounding all 3. Intent on demolishing the house, he closed to within 50 yards, and standing full upright amid machine gun and artillery fire, with a little covering fire from his comrades, he launched another rocket, collapsing half of the wall and exposing the enemy inside. He didn't stop there. Frank advanced alone toward the house, now within 50 yards, intent on taking it out. Covered by friendly fire from his squad, he stood tall, exposed, and fired another bazooka round. It smashed into the wall, collapsing half of it and scattering the Germans inside. Chaos ensued. Then the real heroism kicked in. Frank spotted 5 American soldiers pinned down for hours by fire from the house and the 3 remaining tanks. These men, 2 of whom were wounded, could not retreat without the enemy positions being silent. Currey dashed along the street to a disabled vehicle, gathered an armful of anti-tank grenades. Under heavy fire, he hurled them at the tanks, forcing the crews to abandon their vehicles and retreat into the house. Seizing the moment, he climbed onto the half-track in full view of the Germans and manned its .50 caliber machine gun, raking the enemy position with devastating fire. Changing positions again, Currey took over a 30mm machine gun nest whose crew had been killed by enemy fire. From this vantage, he provided covering fire, allowing the 5 trapped soldiers to withdraw to safety. An artillery spotter, inspired by Currey's actions, later destroyed the lead Panther with a well-placed bazooka shot. By late afternoon, ammunition on both sides dwindled, but the Germans, deprived of their tanks and suffering heavy infantry losses, were compelled to withdraw. Currey's extensive knowledge of weapons from rifles to heavy machine guns and his repeated exposure to murderous fire inflicted significant casualties on the enemy and prevented a flank attack on his battalion. The battle's toll was immense. Currey and 4 others, including the 2 wounded, evacuated by jeep. Frank, riding shotgun on the spare tire, bar at the ready, watching for ambushes under the dim headlights. They navigated their way through roadblocks and checkpoints back to their regiment. His actions that day not only saved lives, but disrupted Skorzeny's plans to seize the bridge, a key objective in the German offensive. Historians note that Currey's stand exemplified the one-man army archetype, where individual initiative turned the tide in localized engagements during the Battle of the Bulge. In fact, that tactic, the one-man army, had been used in just about every conflict, dating all the way back to the Revolutionary War with George Rogers Clark and the Battle of Vincennes, which I'll talk about in a future episode. In the days following 21 December, Currey continued to distinguish himself. Promoted to technical sergeant, he led a squad and earned the Silver Star for gallantry at his regiment's command post, where he repelled another enemy probe. He also received a Bronze Star for further exploits and 3 Purple Hearts for wounds sustained in combat. He even won Belgian honors like the Order of Leopold. By the war's end in May of 1945, Currey had risen to first sergeant, a testament to his leadership under fire. On 27 July 1945, Major General Leyland Hobbs, commander of the 30th Infantry Division, presented Currey with the Medal of Honor near Lomre, Belgium. The Medal of Honor, of course, is our nation's highest military award. The citation praised his, quote, heroic and repeated braving of murderous heavy fire, close quote, crediting him with rescuing comrades and stemming an attack that could have flanked his unit. Later, President Harry S. Truman formally awarded it to him at the White House. Currey met General Dwight Eisenhower, who reportedly told him his actions shortened the war by at least 6 weeks by halting the German advance at Malmedy. Returning home in August of 1945, Currey settled in Hurleyville, New York, marrying and raising a family. He worked for the VA, the Veterans Administration, for over 3 decades, counseling fellow veterans on benefits and readjustment, a role that reflected his enduring commitment to service. In a unique cultural footnote, Currey served as the model for the original G.I. Joe action figure in 1964. His Medal of Honor story inspired Hasbro's design, even down to the scar on his face. Yet, he still remained humble about his heroism, often saying, "I did what I had to do." He participated in veterans events, including Battle of the Bulge commemorations. Currey passed away on 8 October 2019 at the age of 94 in Selkirk, New York, one of the last surviving World War II Medal of Honor recipients. His funeral, attended by New York National Guard members, honored his legacy. Today, Currey's exploits are commemorated at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans and through the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. They remind us of the human capacity for valor amid the horrors of war, where a young man's defiance against overwhelming odds helped secure victory in Europe's darkest hour. So why is Francis Currey today's hero? In a moment of sheer chaos, this 19-year-old orphan from New York became a one-man army, saving lives and holding the line when everything else was falling apart. His bravery reminds us that heroes are not born. They're made in the fire of adversity. Unfortunately, this brings us to the end of another episode of Random History. I hope you enjoyed it and will come back and listen to future episodes. If you'd like to view the transcript or sources for the episode, click the link in the description. You can also make suggestions for future topics by clicking that same link or shooting us an email. As always, I want to thank Argos Media for producing Random History and to thank my wife for her continued support and inspiration. Until next time, make some history of your own. Navigator out.